Good morning, class. We are going to be talking about feeding infants today, but this is what I consider like the home stretch. We are getting close. Okay, we just have a little bit left to cover the semester. Really, just a few weeks, I would say, of content, and so I know that we're all feeling the effects of a full semester, a different type of semester, but hang in there. We are going to make it, and we're going to finish strong. Also to note that as you just adore some of the images in these slides, they are of my children. So they do not look like this anymore. You guys know that because you've seen them pop up in a few different lectures or office hours, or whenever they creep into the picture when I'm talking to you guys, which they try to do often. But yeah, these are from when my children were babies because I have lots of messy food baby face pictures. So I figured, why not, right? All right. So this is going to be just information on feeding infants. So this is more if you're thinking of, it can be practical for your own life if you eventually or have an infant or will have children someday, but also for those that are thinking about going into childcare where you would be taking care of infants. So just to start out, we've got some pretty fascinating facts about infants. We talk about young children as they're growing like weeds, or it seems like they grew overnight. We say things like that, but it almost is actually true. The rate of growth during this first year is more rapid than any other time in their life. I think the second highest rate of growth is during adolescence, but it doesn't even compare to this first year of life. Their height increases by 50%. So what that means is that if you have a 20-inch baby when they're born, they will grow half that amount in the first year. So that's 10 more inches. So they'll go from 20 to 30 inches just in that first year. 10 inches. That's incredible, right? And then their birth weight is going to double just in the first 6 months of life. Now, of course, these are generalizations. These are averages. If you have a baby that didn't quite do this, it's okay, as long as your pediatrician says it's okay. But this is, in general, a baby's birth weight will double those first 6 months. And that's what's incredibly amazing is that it's on a solely liquid diet, right? They're either doing breast milk or formula. And so the amount of calories in that liquid is so dense, right, that it can actually double their birth weight and help them grow as much as they do. But also the way their bodies are designed to just really store every nutrient and use it to its fullest is quite remarkable. And then by the time they're a year, they should triple their birth weight. So just a fun fact, because infants grow at 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds per month. I was an 8-pound baby when I was born, and I haven't updated this. So I've been alive a little bit longer than this, but I've been alive approximately 432 months or 450 months at this point. If I continued to gain weight at the rate that a baby does, that first year of life, a couple of pounds per month, I would be almost 900 pounds at this point. So I'm thankful we don't keep growing at this rate, but nonetheless, it's pretty remarkable. And it just shows you really kind of how much they're growing that first year. All right. So why do infants have special needs in terms of nutrition this first year? Well, we just talked about it, their rapid growth. Also, they have a very small stomach. So when we think about the size of their stomach at birth, it's about the size of a dime. That's tiny, right? No wonder they wake up every 2 hours and need to be fed, because that's just so tiny. And they use all that energy for growth and development, that they need it replenished constantly, right? We wish their stomach was a little bigger so they'd sleep longer, but no such luck. So there is a reason. They're not just difficult, right? They're not, a poor sleeper. It's normal because they have such a tiny stomach that it's going to empty out, and they're going to need to refill it in order to keep that rate of growth up, to keep that brain development up, all the things. I mean, and we're really, like I said, we're just talking kind of about their physical growth. We're not even really considering all the things that are happening within their brain and how that's developing, and the connections that are being made. It's just incredible. And then physiological and developmental readiness is important to think about too, because infants aren't quite ready for certain types of foods. A lot of times we want them to sleep longer, sooner, or we don't want to feed them as often. And so what adults do is try to kind of push their agenda on them, or push efficiency on them. And it doesn't, well, even if it does work, it's not in their best interest, because physiologically they're not ready. Their intestines have not developed to be fully functioning. They don't produce the enzyme amylase, which is what is needed to digest starch. Starch is what is part of cereals that are typically some of the first solids that we give babies. And so a lot of times people want to add those baby cereals to formula or to breast milk to kind of thicken it up, make it heartier so that baby will stay fuller longer. But ultimately, they can't really absorb the nutrients from that. And so what it does is it takes up volume of food that they can't actually take the nutrients out of. It's going to just pass through. But that volume could have been used for more breast milk or more formula, which actually has nutrients that they can use and benefit from. So you're kind of, even if it does mean they sleep longer, it's not, their little bodies aren't ready for it. And it's not giving them all the nutrition that they could benefit from. Also, their kidneys are not effective in filtering waste products. So they are more prone to dehydration. So again, we want to be feeding them often like they're requesting or fussing for, because, if you have a baby that wants to go 4 or more hours, a newborn, we're talking about a newborn here, 4 or more hours without eating, that also can lead to dehydration. And so you want to make sure that they're eating regularly. And then as far as solids go, their tongue actually has a reflex when they're first born for sucking only. And so perfectly designed for nursing or consuming formula from a bottle, but not designed for moving solid food from the front of their mouth to the back of their mouth. So when we introduce solids on a spoon, it starts out here and it needs to get pushed back with their tongue to the back of the throat so that they can swallow it. All this happens and we don't even really think about the mechanics of it. But a baby's tongue actually doesn't have that ability yet. It doesn't come till about 5 or 6 months. Imagine that. That's when we really should start feeding them solids. And so if they can't do that, the food just comes back out, right? They're not getting the nutrition. We're wasting food. So there's certain reasons why we wait and why we only start them with breast milk or formula early on. So let's talk a little bit about breast milk and formula. It's providing all the nutrients a baby needs during those first 4 to 6 months of life. Like I said, every baby, is a little bit different, just like with other developmental areas. Feeding is going to be different too. Some babies are going to develop a little bit faster, and you're going to notice that they are ready for solids a little bit sooner. So it might be 4 or 5 months. 4 seems too early. Like I almost hesitate to say that, although your text does suggest 4 to 6 months. But 5 or 6 months seems reasonable. And the only exception that a baby will not, or that they don't, vitamins that they don't get from breast milk would be vitamin D. We can add that to formula because it's being made anyway, and we can just add that in. Breast milk, though, for whatever reason, the woman's body needs that vitamin D and does not share it in the breast milk with the baby. So you just get a supplement, and you can buy that in over the counter and give that to the baby. And then semi-solid puree foods, those shouldn't be introduced before that 4 to 6 months. Again, they're going to get all the nutrition they need from breast milk or formula. They need to stay well hydrated. Giving them a liquid diet ensures that, and provides everything that they need. So to start out with, we're going to start talking just a little bit about some advantages for the infant with breastfeeding. This is not a pro breastfeeding or pro formula lecture. This is, here are the facts about both, and there are reasons to do both or to do one or the other. That is a personal choice, but it's important to know as a childcare provider how to support those families and the choices that they make when you're helping care for their infants, because you're going to have to help care for the feeding part too. So some advantages to breastfeeding. If a mom is choosing to breastfeed her baby, these are some of the advantages the baby gets, right? It's the right mix of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats in the form that is easy to digest. It's just made from a woman's body, perfectly suited for that baby's needs. It's also high in calorie. We've talked about this, to meet the infant's growth and energy needs. It's especially high in calcium, phosphorus, iron, and vitamin C. These are important vitamins and minerals that babies need during this high growth period because, I mean, if you think about calcium, it goes for bone development. Those bones are growing at a very fast rate if you are going to grow 10 inches in a year. So that's important, right? And then it provides friendly bacteria to the infant's intestines to develop. And so, our body, we think of bacteria as germy and gross, and we want to stay away from it. But we actually have tons of bacteria on our body and inside our body, including our gut. And this bacteria actually helps with mobility, gut mobility. It helps with the digestion of food. It aids in a plethora of ways that even science doesn't fully know yet. But when a baby's born, they don't have that bacteria in there, which is part of why their intestines aren't ready to accept regular food. And so breast milk helps to provide some of that. It also provides the baby with temporary antibodies. So if we think back to when we talked about communicable illnesses and viruses, this was early on in our health section. Antibodies were kind of the memory of our immune system and how to fight off certain viruses or bacteria that our body comes in contact with. As adults, we have come in contact with a lot of different viruses and bacteria over the years. And so now our body knows how to fight that off. So it might mean that we don't get sick at all when we're exposed to certain viruses or bacteria, or it might mean that our colds, flus, things like that are a shorter duration. Our body knows how to handle it because our immune system is ready to fight it. Babies don't have that, right? They haven't been exposed to different viruses and bacteria. And so they can't necessarily fight off, their immune system isn't ready to fight it off. So a lot of times that first cold that a baby gets just lingers and lingers and lingers. They'll have the snotty nose or the cough just for weeks. I mean, literally 3 weeks. I remember the pediatrician telling me, don't be surprised if they're still like this 3 weeks from now. I thought, what in the world? But that's why, because their body is trying to figure out, okay, I've never seen this before. I need to start figuring out how to remember this so I can fight it off later. But it doesn't have the ability to fight it off when they're first born. In those early months, really first 5 years of life, they're still working on ramping up their immune system. And so the mother's breast milk will actually, when a mother is exposed to a virus or bacteria, her immune system responds, creating those antibodies that she already has. But some of those antibodies go into the breast milk. And so when the baby nurses, it gets a little bit of protection from some of those antibodies. In the past, most of the time, women were caring for their infants pretty much completely. And so the infant and the mother never really separated, right? So that meant that if the mother was exposed to something, probably the baby was too, and the mom was giving that baby direct protection against that illness. So that's pretty cool. That's not something that a formula can provide. So the baby's immune system just has to respond as it comes in contact with a virus or a bacteria, and over time develops the immunities through exposure rather than through breast milk. Breast milk typically is less likely to cause an allergic response. Occasionally, babies with very, very sensitive allergies will respond negatively to breast milk because the mother's eating something that gets passed through. But most of the time, it's less likely to cause that allergic response than formula. And then the volume of milk is produced in response to the infant's needs. So if a mom and a baby are together continually, anytime the baby acts hungry, the mother just nurses the baby. That nursing frequency, duration of nursing, even the force of the suck from the baby, all sends cues to that mother's body on how much milk to produce, because it's based in response to the infant. Now, obviously that changes sometimes if a mother is away from her baby. And so either a mom pumps to keep her milk supply up, or the milk supply adjusts to the time of day when they're around each other. So you might feed the baby in the morning or nurse the baby in the morning, then you go to work all day. If you don't pump, your body recognizes, oh, I don't really need to produce milk during this time. So there's not a lot of milk produced, but then there's enough so that then when you get home, you can nurse your baby in the evenings and throughout the night. A woman's body will respond accordingly. Breast milk is always ready, on demand, right? As long as the mother and the baby are together, that milk is ready to go. And you don't have to worry about preparing anything. And breastfed infants have been shown to have lower rates of obesity. So there's some advantages that potentially breastfeeding, and I'm not sure if this is breastfeeding exclusively. I don't have the link to the research, but I think it's breastfeeding exclusively leads to lower rates of obesity. I think when formula is introduced, sometimes there are potentially higher rates of obesity, but it's really hard to tweeze out other environmental conditions that could have led to that obesity. It's just a correlation that they're noticing. It's not a cause. So if you have formula fed your child, it does not mean that they will become obese. And there are too many other factors at play to make that assumption. Sorry guys, my cues are off here. Some other advantages, and this is for the mother. So it's kind of convenient. I mean, it's certainly not an easy process sometimes, but it is convenient. You don't have to get up and mix a bottle. You don't have to figure out the temperature. You don't have to wash the dishes afterwards. So there is a convenience to breastfeeding. It is less expensive. Your body's naturally making that for the baby. So you don't have to purchase formula or as much formula if you're doing both breastfeeding and formula. It's sanitary. So a lot of times when you use a bottle, there can be residue from the formula or the breast milk even left in the bottle. It doesn't get cleaned all the way. That's where bacteria can start to grow. And so we don't have to worry about that with breastfeeding, but sometimes that can happen with bottle feeding, although there are plenty of gadgets and tools and techniques for making sure that that doesn't happen too. And it also helps return the reproductive system back to normal. So as a baby is nursing, especially those, first weeks or a couple months after birth, obviously when the mother was pregnant and the baby grew, the uterus was expanding and stretched out. Everything felt stretched out. And so as the baby nurses, it helps to contract the uterus so that it shrinks back down to its original size. So getting ready either for the next round or for recovery. You also burn about 500 calories a day making breast milk. And so it also helps in sort of losing some of the extra weight that might have been gained during pregnancy as well. Okay, there is a link here to a video, and I'm going to also put this link in the page on Canvas where your slides are attached. But a link to a video, it's about 10 minutes long, and it talks about ways that childcare centers can support breastfeeding mothers in their centers. And it's a great quick overview and informative of some of the things that you'd need to consider. Okay, so a few disadvantages for the mother. She needs to be available, right? Unless you've got a pumping situation set up for work times or times when you're away from your baby, you have to be available to breastfeed your baby. It can limit the father's involvement in feeding, but there's lots of other ways dads can be involved, like especially with those dirty diapers. So this is a minor one, but nonetheless, those in the night feedings, unless you're going to pump and have a bottle ready, if you're breastfeeding, you're the mom. If you're the mom, you're getting up and feeding the baby, because the dad can't do much if the baby's just waking up because they're hungry. Or the partner. Doesn't have to be just the father, right? Somebody else that is helping to care for that child. The mother must pay attention to her dietary intake, especially water. So making sure you have good nutrition. It doesn't mean you have to buy, double the amount of groceries or anything like that, but you do need to eat nutritiously, be well hydrated. Otherwise that can affect the breast milk supply. And it does require support. So if you're going to fully breastfeed, it's almost impossible these days to be with your infant constantly that first year. If you're going to work or if you're doing anything outside the home, needing a support system, whether it's supporting you in pumping and storing your breast milk and feeding breast milk to the baby while you're gone, or whether it's supporting your decision to switch to formula or formula feed just when you're gone, whatever it is, it requires support. Breastfeeding, even though it sounds like so natural and it's just the way our bodies were designed, it's still hard. I can speak from experience. There were tears early on, and not just from the baby. So it is something that does require support and encouragement, but it can be done. And it may not be advisable if the mother's ill, specifically, like a long-term or a chronic illness, because it is an added stress on the body too. But also if the mother has to take certain medications, some of those medications can pass through the breast milk. And so you want to make sure, talking with your doctors and pediatrician about what is safe for the baby, excuse me. And if you need to pump your milk and throw it out during that time, if you want to keep breastfeeding after the illness, or if you should just switch to formula. All right, formula feeding. So formula is made very similar to breast milk. They try to make it as close as they can to the original thing. Again, it won't have those protective antibodies, but it does have vitamin D in it. And so, it's a good option and an acceptable option to give that baby the nutrition they need that first year. Manufacturers are always adding new things to breast milk or to formula because they're studying the composition of breast milk and they're trying to figure out how they can make it even more and more like breast milk. And then mixing the formula is just encouraged to use bottled water or filtered water so that you're avoiding some of those environmental contaminants that come from water supplies. Again, both methods are adequately going to meet the baby's nutritional needs, and they both offer the opportunity for bonding. I think sometimes we think that you can only bond feeding your baby if you're nursing your baby, but that's not true. Now, if you're propping a bottle and walking away, well, then you're not bonding. But if you're holding your baby and you're looking them in the eye and you're talking to them or you're rocking them and snuggling, you can have all of that kind of skin to skin, snuggling, emotional bonding that can happen with breastfeeding, just with formula feeding too. And then there's a lot of reasons why mothers choose what they do. Sometimes they choose a combination of both. Sometimes they want to just breastfeed. Sometimes they want to just formula feed. There's a lot of reasons. It's a personal decision and it can change, right? You might start out breastfeeding and then realize this is too stressful, or I got ill and it's not working out and I need to be on medication and I'm the mom. And so I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself so I can take care of everybody else, right? That's important. We don't do that enough, but we do. We need to take care of ourselves sometimes first so that we can be there for everybody else. If, like I said, a mother needs to be away, if it's just something that doesn't feel right or it's going to be too stressful, that's okay. It's okay to give yourself some grace with that. Of course, if you're addicted to any kind of drugs or tobacco, you should not be breastfeeding because that does pass to the baby and it can cause very serious problems for the baby. And sometimes mothers want to breastfeed and their bodies just aren't set up right to do it. And we don't know why. We don't know why that happens. It's no fault of the mother, but the breast tissue just doesn't have the milk glands or the ability to produce enough for that baby. And so it's okay. It's okay. That's why there's formula. That's why we have technology and science to create these things, right? And then sometimes it's the baby's needs. I specifically had one of my children that I just could not satisfy. Well, with my son, and he was my chunkiest baby. He had rolls upon rolls, and he was so hungry at night. He dried me up, and then he was still crying for more, and we had to give him a little bottle of formula, and that satisfied him, and it made him happier. It made us happier. And so sometimes you just have to do something different. I didn't have to do that with either of my girls, but with him, I did, and that was okay. Okay, so this is just a quick chart, nothing that you need to really remember or certainly won't be on a test of any kind, but this is just what the doctors are looking at when we're looking at the growth during the first year of life. So across the bottom is the age of the baby in months, and then going up, you'll see that there is, it's kilograms on the outside and then pounds. I've charted just my children here just to give you an example, but I want you to look over here at this first the purple line on this chart. So this is my oldest daughter. She was about 6 pounds when she was born. But I just want you to see how they have these lines on here. So these are growth curves. And what they're looking for is to make sure that the baby is somewhere in between these lines, either 5th to 95th. If they're too far below, that means they might not be getting enough nutrition. If they're too far above, might be meaning they're getting too much nutrition. And so this is what they're charting when they're weighing the baby that first year of life. And that's why they want babies to come back, every few months during that first year of life, because they want to make sure that they're on the right trajectory for their weight. if they're not getting enough nutrition, so you can see right here at about 2 months or 2.5 months, my daughter was, here's my cursor, there we go, was 8 pounds. Okay, so she is quite below the 5th percentile. She's very small for her age. I was 8 pounds at birth, right? If that gives you an indication. She was 2 months old and barely 8 pounds. So of course, that's something they're watching. Now, they didn't do anything at the time, but it's just something that they noted. Then when she went back for her 6-month checkup, or just a little after, right, she had caught up. And that happens, but she had caught up and she was now at the 50th percentile. So kind of right in the middle of the average, about, what would it be? 16 pounds, 15 or 17 pounds. But again, this is just what they're looking for. If she had stayed off of the growth curve, if she was under the 5th percentile still, then they would start thinking, okay, it doesn't seem like she's getting enough nutrition. Why is that? Well, I was breastfeeding exclusively. So could it be that I'm not making enough milk for her needs? So we might need a supplement, right? Or add some formula or some kind of additive that makes it more dense and nutritious. So she's getting more calories when she does eat. Do we need to offer more feedings? Is she just not wanting to eat as much, not as interested? But babies need certain nutrition for their brain and growth development. Like we talked about, they're growing so rapidly. So that's why they chart these things. Okay, so how to determine if the baby's needs are being met? Well, we just talked about that a little bit, right? They're gonna watch how they grow, make sure it's at an appropriate weight, they're getting longer, their head circumference, they're gonna measure that, make sure their brain is, or their head is expanding at the right rate for their brain growth. Are they at the appropriate weight? So it means they're getting the nutrition they need. But also, does the baby have energy for active play? So even though my oldest daughter was little and was, a little bit off the chart there, she still was meeting all her milestones, right? She had enough head and trunk control at the right age. She was rolling over at the age they expected. She was sitting up at the age they expected. So she's still meeting all the developmental milestones. And so that's why they just watched it. Right? If she wasn't, though, right? So if her weight was down and she wasn't able to support her neck, or she wasn't able to roll over at 4 months or something like that, then they might think, okay, it seems like there's a lag and it's in multiple areas of development. We might need to intervene. Are they avoiding frequent illness? So nutrition also plays a role in their health, not only for development needs, but also it keeps them healthier. If you have proper nutrition, you're going to avoid more illnesses. Your body can recover faster, or it can fight it off better. Same for us. That's why we need to eat, a variety of fruits and vegetables and make sure we have a healthy diet. So as a baby gets older, right, then they're going to be ready for solid food. So we talked about breast milk and formula, those first, 5 to 6 months of life. Now, how do we know when they're ready to transition? Well, are they able to accept food and swallow it? So when you offer the spoon, it gets in their mouth, you kind of, pull it out so it drags across their lip. And where does the food end up? Does it all just come back out and dribble down their chin? Then they're not ready. It probably means that reflex that we talked about with their tongue hasn't developed yet. Or does it mostly go down? Of course, it's not all going to go down because they're babies and they're messy, but if it's mostly staying in and going down, then that might mean they're ready. Are they able to sit up, right? So they have that trunk control. So their back, their neck, their head, it all is well supported independently. They have enough muscle tone for that. If they're slumped over in a chair still, they're not ready for solids, because you need to have a straight path for your food to go down. Are they able to assert themselves? So this goes along with some trunk control as well as gross motor and fine motor. But, you know, if you offer them a spoon and they are full, they need to be able to turn their head away and give you some of those, oh gosh, I'm blanking on the word, but those communication cues, nonverbal communication. There we go. Because they can't tell you, I'm sorry, I'm full. No, thank you, Mom. They're going to turn their head away. They're going to keep their mouth shut. They're going to try to back away in the chair. They might even use their hand to push it away to tell you no. And we need to respect that, but they need to be able to do that so that we can know when their body's full. And then are they interacting? Are they socializing? That can be fun too when it's feeding time, to really have some of that time together, where they get to sit in their own chair and actually face you. They're so used to being held that this is kind of a new experience for them. And so that can be really fun. And then also, are they showing interest in food? I remember my son specifically, remember he was the chunky one. He would just, about 4 to 5 months old, he would just watch us. He would watch the plate. He'd watch the fork to our mouth. He'd watch us swallow, and then he'd watch us go back down for the next bite. I mean, it was so obvious that he was very interested in what we were eating and wanted to enjoy some of that food. And then are they able to, again, pick up some food, right? So if you put, and this is a little bit later, not when you're first introducing those purees, but as they're, 8 to 10 months, maybe, are they able to pick up a tiny little bite of soft food and put it in their mouth, right? They need to have some of those fine motor skills for starting to feed themselves. So the order that we go in with solids is usually like this. First, you're going to offer cereals. Rice is a lot of times the first because there's less of an allergic response. Again, some of this has to do, too, with family history. If you've got somebody in your family that has a gluten allergy or might have celiac disease, then you might want to avoid some of the other cereals first. They can all be introduced first, but rice is going to be less likely to cause an allergy. So you move through the cereals, and then you go to maybe some pureed vegetables. And so when we're talking about pureed, we mean like in a blender, smoothie-like, but a little thicker than a smoothie so that it can at least sit on a spoon. You start with the vegetables because honestly, once they get a taste of fruit and the sweetness, they sometimes don't want to go back. Then you move to fruits. And this picture looks like we just gave her, it looks green. So it's probably like peas or green beans or something that I'm not sure she was too excited about. And then after fruits, you move on to meats. So again, we're talking pureed, smoothie-like, and other types of proteins. The first year of life, you want to avoid honey. Honey has spores in it that can contain botulism or botulism spores that can give a baby botulism. Botulism is something that comes on pretty quickly, and you will see in your baby essentially like tone changes. So we talk about tone like in terms of muscle tone. Let's say they're sitting up, then you'll notice a day where they're having trouble doing that. And it was a milestone that they had hit, and now they're kind of starting to regress. It usually, again, it has to do with muscle tone. And what it does is it basically works in their body to where it takes away their muscle tone, so much so that if they don't get medical treatment, the muscles even in their chest that we need to breathe become so weak that they start having respiratory issues and could die. When I worked in an intensive care unit, there were, every year a handful of infants that came in because they had botulism, and they were sometimes on ventilators until they could recover. But they needed that support because their tone was so, we called it floppy. They just didn't have any tone and muscle strength to be able to support their breathing. So it can be very, very serious, and it happens pretty quickly. So if you notice that your baby, I mean, this is true for anything, but if you notice that your baby has developed a skill and then can't do it anymore, like sitting up and then can't sit up, that's an instant reason to take them to the doctor. And if you can't get an appointment, then just take them to the emergency room, because that's very serious. But anytime there's a change in development, so they've gained a skill and then they lose it, that's a red flag that you need to get that checked out. And again, when we're talking about introducing foods and solids and when to do it, it's not age-based so much, even though that's kind of how we think of it. It's developmental based. And so if you have a child that is on track developmentally, or if you have a child that is on a slower track developmentally, then you have to make adjustments for when you offer food. So even if they're 6 months old, if they can't sit themselves up all the way, if they can't hold themselves up, if their head still flops, for whatever reason, then it's not time to introduce those foods, and you need to work with your pediatrician on when to do that. So some feeding precautions. Choking obviously is the biggest concern during transition. You want to make sure that you are giving babies, very soft food that doesn't really require chewing. They don't really have teeth to do it anyway. So make sure that it's very pureed, almost liquid-like in those beginning introductions. And if they have any kind of developmental delay, right, then you want to make sure that you understand that condition, you know how their swallowing might be affected, and you take the appropriate precautions. You want to know how to do the Heimlich maneuver and CPR just in case, which you should be if you're caring for other people's children or even your own. Always cut food in small pieces. So as they develop and they move into, small little bites of soft veggies or soft meats, again, it needs to be very small. They don't have as many teeth to chew it up properly. They also don't have the understanding that what goes down this pipe needs to be the right size to fit, right? They don't cognitively recognize how their body works. And so they're not going to think twice about just trying to swallow something that won't actually fit. So you need to be very careful, give them one piece at a time, because if you put it all out on their tray, they will take the handful of the food and try to eat it all at once. So we have to just think ahead there. And then you want to avoid serving hard to chew foods as well. Things like raw vegetables that are still very crunchy. Anything that's sticky, so peanut butter, things like that can really kind of make things stick to each other or kind of get globbed up in your mouth. Those again can be difficult for chewing and can be swallowed too soon and cause choking. This is a pretty nice chart that kind of helps you, think about when to feed what at different stages or different ages, actually. But again, you also want to really focus more on what the baby's doing, right? Are they at this point developmentally? Then it doesn't matter what this age number is, right? You want to make sure they're at this point developmentally in order to start giving them this type of food. So kind of thinking it through that way. Okay. If you have any questions about any of this, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I will be checking in with you soon with the next lecture. Have a great day.